Welcome to the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast, where we guide you through everything you need to know for your certification exam. Whether you're just starting or looking to refine your knowledge, this course will set you up for success. Brought to you by baremetalcyber.com. Let's get started. In cybersecurity, technical protections are only one piece of the puzzle. Organizations must also prove to regulators, auditors, and customers that those protections exist and are working as intended. This is the role of compliance, showing not just that you claim to be secure, but that you can produce credible evidence. On Amazon Web Services, compliance posture is supported by formal frameworks and by tools that make evidence available on demand. Beginners should see compliance as the process of not only locking your doors, but also keeping records that prove they were locked whenever someone asks. AWS Artifact, as we'll learn, is the central portal for accessing that kind of evidence. The landscape of compliance frameworks can feel overwhelming at first. Some, like ISO 27001, provide international standards for information security management systems. Others, like Society Reports, focus on controls and how they are tested by independent auditors. PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, is a specialized framework for handling credit card data. Each framework defines a set of expectations that organizations must meet. For learners, these frameworks act like different sets of building codes. Some apply broadly, some apply to specific industries, but all require evidence that your structure is safe and trustworthy. Alongside these standards are regulatory requirements that carry legal force. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, sets rules for protecting healthcare data in the United States. GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, governs personal data across the European Union. These are not optional benchmarks. They are binding regulations with penalties for non-compliance. Their aim is to protect individuals, privacy, and sensitive information. Beginners should see frameworks and regulations as two sides of the same coin. Frameworks are voluntary guidelines that become industry best practices, while regulations are legal mandates that must be followed. An essential principle in AWS compliance is the Shared Responsibility Model. AWS, as the cloud provider, is responsible for securing the infrastructure, the physical data centers, the networking fabric, and the managed services. Customers, however, are responsible for securing their own workloads, configurations, and access controls. For example, AWS ensures that its data centers meet ISO standards, but the customer must ensure that their S3 buckets are not left open to the public. Beginners should recognize this division as similar to renting an apartment. The landlord secures the building, but tenants must lock their own doors. AWS Artifact is the service that makes compliance evidence accessible. It is essentially a self-service portal where customers can download compliance reports and review agreements. Instead of requesting documents from AWS through lengthy processes, customers can log into Artifact and instantly access what they need. This accelerates audits, simplifies due diligence, and helps prove compliance more efficiently. Beginners should see Artifact as AWS's digital filing cabinet for trust, a place where all the official paperwork is neatly organized and ready to share when asked. Through Artifact, organizations can access key reports such as SOC audit results, ISO certifications, and PCI attestations. These are third-party assessments that verify AWS's own compliance with widely recognized standards. For example, if an auditor asks whether AWS data centers have undergone SOC 2 Type 2 testing, you can provide the report directly from Artifact. For learners, this is a major reassurance. You don't have to take AWS's word for its compliance. Independent evidence is available, signed and certified, ready to back up your claims. One specific kind of document available in Artifact is the Business Associate Agreement, or BAA. This is critical for organizations handling healthcare data under HIPAA. The BAA outlines responsibilities between AWS and the customer, ensuring that protected health information is managed in a compliant manner. Beginners should see the BAA as a formal handshake between AWS and the customer, confirming that both sides understand and commit to their obligations under HIPAA. Without it, healthcare workloads cannot safely or legally be hosted on AWS. Permissions for accessing Artifact itself must be carefully managed. Not every user in an AWS account should be able to download sensitive compliance documents. Artifact supports role-based access control, allowing organizations to grant permissions on a least privilege basis. This means only authorized compliance officers or auditors can access reports, while other users are restricted. Beginners should think of this as deciding who gets keys to the filing cabinet. Not everyone in the office needs them, and fewer keys mean tighter security. Scope awareness is another important part of compliance evidence. Not every AWS service in every region is automatically covered by every certification. For instance, a new AWS service may not yet be included in PCI DSS scope. Artifact reports include these details, so teams must check carefully to ensure the services they use are covered by the certifications they rely on. Beginners should think of this like checking the warranty on a product. It's valuable, but only if it applies to the item you actually own. Evidence handling does not stop at downloading reports. Organizations must store, tag, and retain compliance documents appropriately for their own audits. This might mean keeping copies in encrypted storage, labeling them with metadata for easier retrieval, and defining retention policies so reports are available for several years. Beginners should picture this as keeping receipts. They are useless if lost or disorganized, but carefully filed and labeled, they make proving compliance much easier when the auditor arrives. AWS also provides a set of compliance programs that map services to controls, helping customers see how their workloads align with standards. These mappings allow teams to understand how using a particular service supports compliance with frameworks like CIS or FedRAMP. For learners, this is like a guidebook that tells you which tools in your toolbox meet which building codes. Instead of guessing, you have a direct mapping between AWS services and the controls they satisfy. Governance ties these resources into broader organizational processes. Risk registers, internal audits, and compliance programs can all reference Artifact reports as evidence. This ensures that compliance is not just a technical exercise, but part of enterprise governance. Beginners should think of this as weaving AWS compliance evidence into the organization's larger accountability framework. It creates a paper trail that auditors, executives, and regulators can all follow confidently. Another factor to consider is cadence. Compliance certifications and reports are not permanent. They must be renewed and reissued periodically. Artifact provides updated versions as AWS completes its cycles of audits and certifications. Customers must ensure they are using the latest versions rather than relying on outdated documents. Beginners should think of this as renewing a driver's license. It expires and must be kept current to remain valid. Staying on top of these cycles is part of responsible compliance management. For exam preparation, it is important to know exactly what Artifact provides. It is the portal for AWS compliance reports and agreements. It does not detect threats, remediate issues, or enforce configurations. Those are handled by other services. Artifact's role is evidence on demand, making it easier for organizations to prove compliance and build trust. Beginners should remember this distinction. Artifact is about paperwork and proof, not active monitoring or security controls. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Using Artifact in practice often means preparing due diligence packets for auditors, regulators, or customers. Instead of scrambling to gather evidence from scattered sources, teams can log into Artifact and download the official reports directly. These packets may include society reports, ISO certificates, and PCI attestations. Having these documents in hand demonstrates that AWS's infrastructure meets stringent controls, allowing organizations to focus on their own responsibilities. For learners, Artifact serves as the binder of proof you bring to an audit meeting, neatly organized and always up to date. In multi-account environments, a strategy for Artifact is necessary. Centralizing downloads through an administrator account in AWS organizations prevents every individual team from separately retrieving the same reports. This not only reduces administrative overhead but also ensures consistency. By designating a compliance lead or shared account for Artifact, organizations can keep a single trusted copy of every report. Beginners should imagine this as a central library card that one trusted librarian uses to check out books for everyone, rather than letting dozens of people independently borrow and misplace them. AWS CloudTrail provides visibility into Artifact activity, logging events such as who downloaded which report and when. This creates accountability and ensures that compliance evidence handling itself is auditable. If a regulator asks whether sensitive reports were shared responsibly, these logs prove who accessed them. Beginners should see this as a visitor logbook at the filing cabinet. Not only is the cabinet locked, but every time someone opens it, their name and time of entry are recorded. This adds another layer of trust and control to the compliance process. Artifact also helps with control mapping to frameworks like CIS benchmarks and FedRAMP requirements. These mappings clarify which AWS services align with specific controls, guiding customers in their own compliance journeys. For example, knowing that EC2 instances meet certain CIS controls helps organizations align their infrastructure with those standards more confidently. For learners, this is like using a cross-reference chart in a study guide. It shows exactly which chapters address which exam questions, saving time and reducing uncertainty. Continuous monitoring is a best practice that goes hand in hand with Artifact. While Artifact provides static reports, services like AWS Config and Security Hub provide dynamic, ongoing checks of compliance. By pairing Artifact's documents with these services, organizations create a comprehensive program. Long-term certification evidence from AWS, combined with real-time monitoring of their own workloads. Beginners should recognize that both are necessary. One satisfies auditors, the other ensures daily operations remain secure and compliant. Vendor management is another area where Artifact is invaluable. When organizations need to prove AWS compliance to third-party partners, they can share appropriate excerpts from Artifact's reports. Instead of vague assurances, they provide signed, formal evidence. Beginners should think of this as showing a passport at a border crossing. It is an official document that immediately builds trust. Used correctly, Artifact strengthens relationships with vendors and partners by making compliance transparent and verifiable. Data residency is a frequent concern in global organizations. Regulators may require proof that data remains within certain geographic regions. Artifact reports can provide this assurance by showing which regions and services are certified under specific frameworks. For learners, this is like showing zoning permits that prove a building was constructed according to local codes. Artifact provides the evidence that AWS complies with regional requirements, helping customers meet their own obligations for data sovereignty. Contract addenda are another component accessible through Artifact. Service terms often include additional clauses for regulated industries, such as HIPAA or financial services. Reading these addenda carefully ensures organizations understand what AWS guarantees and where their responsibilities begin. Beginners should see this as reading the fine print of a lease. The landlord covers building maintenance, but tenants must still lock their doors. Knowing exactly who is responsible for what prevents misunderstandings during audits or incidents. Keeping executives informed is essential, and Artifact supports concise compliance status reporting. By presenting the latest reports, organizations can show leadership where they stand relative to frameworks like ISO or society. This transparency helps leaders understand both strengths and risks. For learners, this shows how compliance evidence is not just for auditors, but also for executives making strategic decisions. Compliance status informs business planning as much as it satisfies regulators. There are pitfalls to avoid with Artifact, particularly around outdated reports and scope mismatches. Teams that rely on old certifications may misrepresent their compliance, while assuming coverage extends to all services could lead to dangerous gaps. Beginners should see this as relying on an expired driver's license. It looks official, but it is no longer valid. Always verify that the latest documents are in hand, and that the specific services and regions you use are covered by the certifications you claim. For exams, it is critical to distinguish Artifact from other AWS services. Security Hub aggregates findings and provides security dashboards, while Artifact delivers compliance documents and agreements. Artifact does not scan your environment or detect threats. It simply provides evidence that AWS itself meets certain standards. Beginners should lock this distinction in memory. Artifact is paperwork and proof, not active monitoring. This clarity will prevent confusion when exam questions ask which tool addresses compliance reporting. In conclusion, AWS Artifact streamlines compliance by giving organizations on-demand access to audit-ready evidence. It provides reports, certifications, and agreements that prove AWS meets global standards while leaving customers to secure their own workloads under the Shared Responsibility Model. For learners, the lesson is that Artifact is not about live monitoring, but about building trust through credible documentation. Used alongside config, security hub, and governance processes, it helps organizations demonstrate compliance consistently and confidently. Evidence on demand turns audits from hurdles into manageable checkpoints of trust. That concludes today's episode of the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode and visit us online at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me for more resources, including news, mailing lists, YouTube videos, podcasts, and much more.